Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Unique Items! Today we're clearing off another one of the very few items left that I have, well, missed. And that is the Raven Lore Sky Spirit. And, it's probably a good thing that I missed this item, because if I had created a video on this item pre-2.4, before they beefed up the Fire Druid, a lot of people would have just commented that it was garbage, and nobody would have ever used it, and the video would have been out of date relatively quickly because when they updated the Fire Druid and changed a lot of things, this helmet has definitely become a lot better than it was before. And not just in one way, but in multiple ways it has become better, believe it or not. This is an elite level helmet, and it is level 74, so it's going to be judged based on its endgame potential. The Ravenlore Sky Spirit has 390 defense, which isn't bad. There is definitely higher defense items, like the Jalal's Mane, which is 477. And it does have stiff competition with Jalal's Mane, because Jalal's is just so ridiculously good. We also have a strength requirement of 113, which is relatively low. Maybe a little bit high for an Elemental Druid, but still relatively low. And Elemental Druids may be using a Spirit Monarch Shield, which is 156 anyway, and due to that 156, the 113 really doesn't look like that much of a deal anymore. We also have +3 to elemental skills on here, which is actually really nice, and that is static, so it always rolls with +3 elemental skills, which does technically trump Jalal's +2, but the problem with this is if you are kind of like a hybrid build where you're building into other categories, this can be an issue because, well, now you're not getting the +2 to the other categories that you might necessarily want the hybrid skills in. Now, Elemental Druids don't really generally tend to build hybrid into the Shapeshifter tree because you can't cast abilities in the Shapeshifter tree when you're actually shapeshifted, so you can't really cast those elemental skills while you're a wolf or a bear. So it doesn't really work out that way. And on top of that, when you take into account things like Fire Claws, even Fire Claws really doesn't benefit from plus to elemental skills because soft points will not enhance the elemental skills anyway. So for instance, if you have the synergy bonuses for Fire Claws, which are obviously in the elemental tree, +3 elemental skills is not going to help that. So again, it kind of seems like a not really a good option for a shapeshifter in general anyway. Now you are missing out on the summoning skills though, which is a little bit of a downside, because specifically the summoning tree has been beefed up quite nicely, and things like the grizzly bear, or like the spirit wolves or the dire wolves can come in handy to run interference, as well as the ravens, of course, can also help blind things that may be trying to kill you. We also have negative 20% enemy fire resistance on here. Now this does roll, so it rolls between negative 10 to negative 20. So the best Raven lore obviously would be a negative 20 version of this, being that this helmet is postured directly at an Elemental Druid, and specifically a Elemental Fire Druid. You would definitely want the highest amount of negative enemy fire resistance that you could get. Now, this helmet does have stiff competition in 2.4, so not only has this helmet been beefed up by quite a bit due to changes, the helmet also has stiff competition in the new rune word Flickering Flame, which also has negative enemy fire resistance and some other very nice effects. We also have +7 to Raven, which is just massive. So just putting this helmet on will give you access to the Ravens at a particularly high level. And it's also important to note that if you are a summoning druid specifically, the summon skills will actually benefit from passive bonuses. So the wolf, the dire wolf, and the summon grizzly all benefit from passive bonuses, obviously, but the raven does not. As far as I understand it, the Raven's passive bonuses don't work that way, although I could be wrong, but the Raven doesn't provide any bonuses to the wolf, the dire wolf, and the grizzly, though. So they don't actually get anything from the Raven, but the Raven does get bonuses from the other characters, or the other members of the pack. So if you were an Elemental Druid, there's a very good chance you may be running Grizzly Bear anyway, so that you can get a beefy tank monster, right? To just a meat shield to absorb damage while you dish out yours. And you're going to put points into Spirit Wolf and Dire Wolf, and probably a couple points into the Grizzly to make him strong enough to actually get the job done. And when you do this, it's going to synergize with the Ravens. The Ravens are going to get some pretty decent amount of damage now, especially if you build heavily into the summoning tree. So that +7 actually could come in really handy to beef up the Ravens, like a lot more than I think you could ever get the Ravens. Just off the top of my head, even if you had like a +3 summoning skills blue helmet, like Druid helmet, that happened to have +3 Raven on it, that would only be +6. So this is technically one higher than the most ridiculously rare +3/+3 helmet that you'd probably ever get your hands on. Now, granted, if you did find like a +3 summoning skill Druid, +3 Raven, +3 Grizzly, +3 Dire Wolf or something, it would probably trump this in a heartbeat. But those are actually even more ridiculously hard to find. We also have 150 enhanced defense on this, which does vary from 120 to 150. And then we have +30 to energy, which is pretty massive. And as you can see from my mana pool down here, I go from 170. Actually, I'm in the way, aren't I? How dare I be in the way? Put myself in the middle. There we go. You can see I have 170, and I go to 230, so a nice little bump there in mana from the energy. The only problem is the energy is a variable, and it does vary from 20 to 30. And then on top of that, we also have some all resistances, which is definitely very nice, and the all resistances is +25. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't really compare very well with the all resistances 30 on the Jalal's main. And of course, Jalal's also has +20 energy, so unless it rolls +30, Jalal's main is better in both energy and resistances, which just really exemplifies just how ridiculous Jalal's main is. All in all, this helmet is a very good helmet for an elemental fire druid. That is where it's postured. Specifically at an elemental fire druid who probably is building sub into the summoning tree to help tank for him. The ethereal version also is here, and it has 585 defense with 103 strength at level 74. And quite honestly, you could use it. I mean, as an elemental druid, you don't really get hit a lot anyway. You're kind of hanging in the back. You're doing your thing. Maybe you got your summons up. Your ravens are blinding things. For the most part, you probably could utilize the Raven lore in its ethereal form for quite some time. So if you did happen to find one, certainly wouldn't be a bad option. And, I mean, quite honestly, the Raven lore has a purpose, which is an elemental druid buff stick, basically, specifically a fire elemental druid. So we're talking about, Firestorm, Molten Boulder, Fissure, Volcano, and Armageddon. And the fire tree has definitely seen quite a large number of buffs in the past couple patches. Armageddon is now separate from Hurricane. You no longer have to build down that tree to access Armageddon. They have also kind of fixed the synergies a little bit on these skills as well, making them a little less nasty to build. And having negative 20% enemy fire resistance is definitely going to beef up your damage substantially. However, it is important to note that all of the druid's skills are basically physical and fire, so it's a little bit less than you would think. And I know this kind of sounds mean because, having two different types of damage on a skill is certainly a good thing. But when you have half the skill's damage is physical and half the skill's damage is fire, well, it creates a little bit of an issue because we're getting a huge little bonus, of negative 20% enemy fire resistance, to the monster, which of course is going to help beef up our damage, our fire damage, but only half of the skills, only half of the damage is fire damage. So it's doing a little less than it would on, say, like a sorceress, which is firing a lightning bolt. Lightning bolts aren't physical and lightning, and so when she has negative 20% enemy lightning resistance, it's doing more than it is on the elemental fire druid. all in all, Ravenlore is definitely an helmet that has stiff competition from things like Jalal's Mane. I also would have really liked to have seen some faster cast on this helmet to really separate it out from Jalal's. Jalal's doesn't have faster cast, and although it is an amazing helmet, which can literally be put on just about any freaking druid, like bar none, it doesn't have faster cast, and you would think that a helmet like Sky Spirit Ravenlore is, would be a little bit more specifically pointed at a caster type. The other thing that really bugs me is that frickin' Jalal's Mane has that amazing +5 to mana after each kill, and Ravenlore does not. So while Ravenlore does have some of the statistics that Jalal's Mane has, it's missing some of the more amazing ones, like the +5 to mana after each kill, the 30% faster hit recovery, even the +20 strength can come in handy on a caster type. Sorry. Who is, trying to utilize some higher strength equipment without dumping all his points into strength like a Spirit Monarch shield. And then the other thing about this helmet is that despite the fact that it is, like a niche item, which is only necessarily used by pretty much one class and one build, which is the Fire Elemental Druid, it has huge rolls on it compared to Jalal's. So if you find a Jalal's, if you were lucky enough to find one, there's like no rolls on the thing. The defense is like the only thing that rolls on Jalal's. Whereas with the Ravenlore, we're looking at the defense rolls, the energy rolls, the negative enemy fire resistance rolls, and the all resistances rolls. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different rolls on this helmet, and I guarantee you it's probably not easy to find. So let's go over to Silo's Pen real quick, and let's look at that, shall we? So we're going to take a look, and we're going to see where we can potentially find ourselves a Ravenlore. Ravenlore is probably going to be hard to find. I'm just going to guess right off the top of my head that it's hard to find. It's also level 73, though, so we're going to use 300% Magic Find as our base here. And we're going to hop over to Silo's Pen real quick. Bink. And we're going to take a look at this item, and we're going to see what its best drop places are. Alright, so bosses, ignoring quest flags, we've got Bale in Hell, Neelathak in Hell, and Diablo in Hell. Diablo in Hell's chance is absolutely awful at 1 in 32,000 with 300% Magic Find. Bale in Hell has 1 in 4,070. So Bale in Hell is probably your best bet, not only because, well, the other ones are absolutely horrible as far as chances go. It seems like it only tends to drop from the highest level of monsters. Let's take a look at super uniques. And we've got horrible probabilities here. Neelathak, 1 in 30,000. Pindle, 1 in 34,000. Snapchip Chatter, 1 in 34,000. Thresh Socket, 1 in 34,000. I mean, these are awful chances. Even Doc Farron can drop it, but at 1 in 46,696. And then from there, it just gets even worse. 1 in 173,000. And then as high as 1 in 370,000. Like, it's not even worth talking about. It does seem like Pindle could be a alternative if you just didn't want to farm Bale and Thresh Socket. So you could probably run Pindle, Thresh Socket, Doc Farron relatively easily. Or if you're running Neelathak for Destruction Keys, that could also be an option. But as you can see, not only is Ravenlore terrible in terms of what it rolls, which means we have horrible, like, not just 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 different rolls on the helmet, which could potentially make the helmet not very good. But we also have a relatively rare drop chance, which means that that Jalal's wins, like, by default. Because the chances of you finding a Ravenlore is already slim to none. And then when you do find a Ravenlore, there's a very good chance it's still going to be worse than Jalal's, specifically because it may roll with absolutely terrible negative enemy fire resistance, terrible resistances, and terrible energy. Now, the defense may not be that big of an equation, but if you rolled like bottom tier on every single thing, and you look at the Ravenlore, you're going to say, well, this looks like a piece of garbage. And you're probably going to drop it back on the ground where it belongs. Now, that's not to say that if you did find a perfect Ravenlore, it could certainly be useful, but I just don't think you're going to. The chances of actually locating a perfect Ravenlore are just so slim. Anyway, this video wouldn't be a good Ravenlore video unless I put the helmet on and cast a bunch of ravens. There. As always, quoth the raven, nevermore.